at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GBNews.
Hello and welcome, I'm Nana Akweer, and for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's journalist, author, and dating expert Nikki Hodgson, trends guru James Woodhousen, who's a visiting professor of forecasting and innovation at London South Bank University, and political commentator Jason Reed of Young Voices UK. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. Good evening. I'm Polly Middlehurst with your news at 10 o'clock. The UK has reported a record 183,000 new daily COVID cases. And doctors have been advising the Prime Minister that 90% of people being treated in intensive care have not received their booster vaccines. Boris Johnson's therefore urging people to get the jab so they can enjoy New Year celebrations. 800,000 boosters were recorded across the UK during the 5-day Christmas period. Meanwhile, pharmacists are reporting a huge problem with shortages of lateral flow tests, saying there were requests every 5 minutes over the Christmas period. The Association of Independent Multiple Pharmacies is warning of patchy supplies following a change in self-isolation rules from 10 to 7 days if someone tests negative. The UK Health Security Agency said almost 8 million test kits will be made available to pharmacies by New Year's Eve. And in Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon says she won't be introducing any further coronavirus restrictions because hospital cases have remained broadly stable. The First Minister says she expects a steep increase in cases, however, in the coming weeks. Scots are also being urged not to travel to England for New Year's Eve because clubs are still open there.
And it's also why over Hogmanay and New Year's Day and for at least the first week of January, we are advising everyone to stay at home more than normal, to reduce contacts with people outside our own households and to limit the size of any indoor social gatherings that do take place so that they don't include people from any more than 3 households.
Well, that's Scotland. What about France? In France, 2 people are testing positive for COVID every single second. That's according to the country's health minister, who also said France had reported a record daily high of 208,000 new cases. That's up from 180,000 yesterday. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization's Director General says he's becoming increasingly concerned about the uptick in global cases.
Delta and Omicron are twin threats that are driving up cases to record numbers. I'm highly concerned that Omicron, being more transmissible, circulating at the same time as Delta, is leading to a tsunami of cases.
Meanwhile, in the UK, social care system is not fit for purpose and is handing some children over to criminal gangs, according to a new report. The Commission on Young Lives says many teenagers are moved away from where they live and sometimes end up in areas with high levels of crime. The Department for Education says it's urgently reforming the system to address growing pressures. International news, and Russia and Belarus plan to hold joint military drills next year as tensions rise in the region. President Vladimir Putin has met with the Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko in St. Petersburg. Ukraine says Russia may be preparing for an invasion, something Moscow denies. The Russians, for their part, are demanding that NATO promises not to admit Ukraine as a member, a country which borders both Russia and Belarus. You're up to date. I'm back in an hour. Now, over to Nana.
So, has Boris made the right call? You heard at the beginning of the pandemic, Boris suggested that we would lose loved ones early, etc., which to me actually came across that the plan was some sort of herd immunity through exposure to the virus. There was a pretty slapdash approach, a sort of lethargy that we in the UK would be different from places like northern Italy, who have a world-class health service. We let hospitality, global travel and events like the Cheltenham race event and the match against Spain go ahead because, for some odd reason, we believed that our handling of COVID would be somewhat superior. Oh, how wrong we were. I don't think it's necessary for me to remind anyone of what we've all been through over the last 2 years, but it's not been great. When Boris himself caught the virus and almost died, there was a distinct change in tack.
I pay my own thanks to the utterly brilliant doctors, leaders in their fields, men and women, but several of them for some reason called Nick, who took some crucial decisions a few days ago, for which I will be grateful for the rest of my life. I want to thank the many nurses, men and women, whose care has been so astonishing. I'm going to forget some names, so please forgive me, but I want to thank Poling and Shannon and Emily and Angel and Connie and Becky and Rachel and Nikki and Anne.
Do you think he's forgotten them already? Almost 2 years on, with the virus mutating as though it's on steroids, a supercharged vaccination process, antivirals and antibody treatments, we finally find what could be a natural vaccine, the considerably less deadly Omicron, a mutation of the virus that may actually offer protection from the Delta variant whilst being much more transmissible, thereby overtaking it and becoming the main infection. And instead of allowing life to go on as normal, having achieved herd immunity and an option for a booster, some parts of the UK appear to have gone power mad. Nicola Sturgeon earlier today.
£16 million will be made available to support public transport providers through existing COVID support schemes. £27 million will go to the culture sector and a further £17 million to the events sector. A further £32 million will be allocated to hospitality and leisure businesses, with an additional £10 million for those parts of the hospitality industry most severely impacted by the requirement for table service. And up to £5 million will be allocated to nightclubs required to close.
Oh, she's chucking the money around as though it's her money. It's all of ours. And I could do with a new car, Nicola, any chance of a handout. I couldn't buy one because of COVID. My mother wasn't impressed at all. I just can't stand that woman. Look at her. The way she is turning the pages as though she is signing blank cheques. Who does she think she is? She makes my blood boil, God forgive me. Then Mark Drakeford, his restrictions, which meant that in Wales, Parkrun had to cancel its outdoor races in the park. Yes, outdoor, eh?
Large events will not be able to go ahead indoors or outdoors. The maximum number of people who can gather at an indoor event will be set at 30, and 50 people will be able to meet outdoors.
Sajid Javid criticised this, saying, I can't see how restricting outdoor exercise in this way is justified or proportionate. Yes, me neither. I'm confused at these heavy-handed tactics. I absolutely believe in getting the booster, but could this now be the right time to allow life to go on as normal? Today, we hear that there have been 57 deaths and just over 183,000 infections. Now, every death is very tragic, and my heart goes out to the families, but this is not an extraordinary number like the huge numbers that we have been accustomed to seeing. And apparently, those classed as unvaccinated are overrepresented in ICU, but it also transpires that a lot of people who are diagnosed with COVID in hospital went there for something else, which either means that they caught it in hospital or were asymptomatic when they arrived. In my view, the figures don't appear to be very forthcoming. Have I missed something here? Has Boris Johnson actually made the right call keeping England open for business? What do you think? So before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. Omicron boosts our immunity against the stronger Delta strain of COVID. That is according to research from South Africa. I'm asking, is Omicron actually our saviour in the fight against COVID? Then we're talking menopause and giving women menopause mentors in their workplace. That's the call from a leading expert. But would it do more harm than good to women standing in this whole environment and being singled out? And later on, we'll be discussing the ever-spiralling cost of living. Is life simply getting too expensive? That's coming up in the next hour. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk, or why not send me a tweet at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Welcome again to my panel. Nikki Hodgson, James Woodhousen and Jason Reed. Right, so first I want to talk about this whole idea. England, not Scotland or Wales, we're carrying on. We're not going to close up, as some of the others are doing. Boris has decided that we've waited, we've got the data. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts? I'm going to start with you, Nikki. What do you make of this? Is he right?
Well, Boris Johnson's political career depends on him doing this, and it has done for some time. So I think whatever he's going to say publicly and whatever is being reported, the reality is that he would lose leadership if he had shut down the country. So because of that, it's very difficult to know if what Boris has decided to do has been guided by appropriate science and appropriate data, or whether it's just part of his political machinations.
What do you make of this, James?
Well, I don't know that he's made the right call. I think the considerations that you adduce are right. He is obviously influenced by the more than 100 Tory backbenchers who gave him a lot of heat just a few days ago. I don't know that he's really following events with the kind of precision, the neutrality, and the attention to detail that we'd all like. But hey, he's Boris.
Yeah, he's not famed for his attention to detail.
So you couldn't give him credit if it is the right call. You think that he's doing it for a different reason altogether. It's not actually the fact that it might be the right decision to make.
I don't think that he, when I hear the phrase Boris Johnson making the right call, I have a picture of him reading up, taking notes, balancing the evidence, consulting neutral opinion and all of that. I'm not sure he's doing any of that, really. He's working from minute to minute. That's my impression.
You think what do you think?
I agree with James's assessment of Boris's character. I think he makes it up as he goes along. He's more worried about what the newspaper headlines will say the next day than anything else, and the health consequences or the political consequences of what he's doing. In this case, I think almost by accident, he's made the right call by not introducing new restrictions.
So even if he does the right thing and he gets it right in your eyes, it's still by accident. You cannot appear to give him credit for the fact that he's held off on a decision. Remember, Chris Whitty did say something quite opposite. Some people would say that Chris Whitty was suggesting that we should start to close things down and do this, that and the other. And Boris sort of left it and said, no, he took a call that was slightly different.
Well, I think what Boris could and should do if he was laying down a marker and providing the proper leadership would be to say, at this point, we're going to have no more restrictions for, say, the next 6 months unless something dramatic happens, like they did after Freedom Day earlier this year when Sajid Javid said it's completely irreversible, we can never go back. And, of course, Omicron came along and ruined that. But Boris, he just, as I say, he makes it up as he goes along. He's not capable of looking beyond the immediate.
Is it realistic for him to put a time frame of 6 months? Because then we'll end up in the situation that you just described there. If he says in 6 months, then he'll be doing the backtracking that you just described, which wasn't helpful at all.
The problem is that we're never going to reach 100% immunity from COVID.
Impossible.
We're never going to have zero COVID. And so I think there comes a point where you have to draw a line. And I think we have passed that point. Omicron is exactly what you'd expect as a virus mutates. It's more transmissible, but milder. It's much less likely to kill you or to create serious illness. And so this is surely the point at which we say the costs of restrictions now outweigh the benefits.
But Boris has made that call. Nicola Sturgeon, on the other hand, has not made that call at all, and neither has Mark Drakeford. In fact, Mark Drakeford even cancelled or, put his regulations meant that a park run, which is outdoors, couldn't go ahead. I mean, does that sound reasonable?
Well, it's obviously completely ridiculous, and you wonder what planet he's on. But I'm very struck by Nicola Sturgeon. I mean, £5 million to help nightclubs in Scotland. That's about a round of drinks in Glasgow, nearly. It's not going to solve anything. And I think we're still too nice to Boris. Backed up by his acolytes in the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats, he has ensured a really censorious atmosphere in schools, in shops, about the NHS, about mask wearing, about physical contact. And then now we've got this complete rash of testing. You can't go anywhere without a test. You get to the bus stop, take a test.
Well, you can't get a test.
Well, you can get a test.
You'd be lucky to get one.
It's a classic Boris thing,
But it's not his fault. Look, hang on, but the test, OK, yeah, but we have to be honest here. Is the test, the fact that you can't get a test, his fault? I mean, it's more to do with the whole supply issue, and now we've got a global shortage of these tests as well. Is it more to do with management?
But that's also his fault, isn't it? So it's like if you're getting intelligence from your ministers or from, scientists saying, we think there's this thing coming, the first thing you do is then order more tests because you pre-plan. We've had 2.5 years pretty much of getting used to this situation, and he hasn't improved in his timing, and it's his timing that is crucial to getting on top of the pandemic. He never takes an action quick enough.
What about the booster campaign then? He's got the boosters going.
The booster thing, maybe he's going to get that right this time. I mean, the numbers are looking good so far.
But I thought surely our vaccination rollout was good, or was that not? We're not crediting Boris.
It was good, but the problem is then we didn't support COVAX. We didn't help the countries that desperately needed vaccines. The whole reason we have Omicron is because we didn't support COVAX in vaccinating other countries.
I hear you, but Omicron could end up being a good thing. I mean, look, is not part of the equation of this. Some people remain unvaccinated, some people are vaccinated. In the end, you end up with the super sort of COVID going about that tries to evade certain things and others. And in the end, you end up with something like Omicron, which maybe it would not have mutated in that way had it not been for people.
But it's like how many lives and how many livelihoods are lost before we get to that point, isn't it? Because, we could say, Omicron's going to finish off COVID. This is perfect. This is exactly what we needed to happen. But at what human cost? We didn't have to have this kind of pandemic.
Do you not
but a different one.
Do you not think the virus has its own sort of lifespan, and we kind of this couldn't have been changed in any way, even a vaccination progress, because our process of vaccination has been pretty quick.
Well, it reacts to stimulus, doesn't it? It's reacting to the vaccine, so it's a shapeshifter. It reacts to what we do. What we do matters and affects the progress of Omicron or any other variant.
From South Africa, which was one of the least vaccinated places on the earth.
Because we didn't support them being vaccinated.
No, but what you said just there was that Omicron responded to the fact that we have a vaccine, but didn't, because it came from somewhere where people are hardly vaccinated at all. So my point is that surely the lack of vaccinations and the lack of people being vaccinated and the whole soup of it created the situation that Omicron exists.
But it's a combination of those factors. It's not one thing or the other, is it? It's the fact there are some vaccinated people and some non-vaccinated people. All these, we can't know at this point what one factor has now brought about this new pathogen.
Exactly, that's true. But at the end of the day, the move to leave England open seems like a good idea to me.
It seems politically astute. It seems politically prudent. Above anything else.
Is that all you'd put it down to? Political prudence?
Quite possibly. Look, what it comes down to is this. If we can't be free now, that means we can never be free again. At some point, we have to learn to live with COVID. There's no way around that. If Boris Johnson really believed in the values he talks about of freedom and personal responsibility, then he would be laying down a marker very clearly and saying, as I said before, no more restrictions, and that's the end of it.
But that's what he said here. It's the others. So it's Mark Drakeford, it's Nicola Sturgeon. Nicola Sturgeon, she was literally going across that because there was a chequebook. Wasn't she, really?
Well, but we're not out of the woods yet. That's the point. If you're being unfair to them, you're saying that they're being, overly worrying. But if you're being fair to them, you're saying that they're being well-meaning. If heavy-handed, they're actually putting life before anything else. And with her signing blank cheques, at least she is realising that you cannot shut down businesses, particularly hospitality businesses, at this time of the year without giving them a lifeline.
But Boris hasn't shut them down. He's basically done what we said all along, which was that we want to make our own choices.
But
so
that's the worst thing for the businesses.
But they're businesses, aren't they? So they are capitalist businesses that work with supply and demand.
They are.
Therefore, at some point they're going to have to start living in the environment.
But some businesses have suffered more than others.
The thing is, we've got to rise above the detail, right? And the fact is, it's not all about Boris. That's a Labour Party trope, right? It's ridiculous to personalise it in the way that he has been personalised for so long. But the real thing is that Drakeford and Sturgeon and arguably Boris, they're against parties. They're against people having fun. They're against drinking. They're against nightclubs.
We'll come back to that, actually, because we've got some breaking news with regard to the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, so we'll go over to Polly for an update.
Nana, thank you. Some significant breaking news reaching us from New York in the United States. Within the last few minutes, I can tell you that Ghislaine Maxwell, the British socialite and daughter of the British media tycoon Robert Maxwell, has been convicted on 5 out of 6 counts of grooming and trafficking underage girls for the financier Jeffrey Epstein. We have a verdict in. We know that earlier on today, the judge in New York had ordered the jurors to come to a verdict, and if they couldn't, that they would be ordered to work extra hours to reach their verdict. Some say that that was pressing them to come to a conclusion and was incorrect, but other analysts saying that because of the COVID-19 outbreak, it was pertinent to do so. And certainly the jury have felt that pressure and reached a verdict. We have a verdict. That is the breaking news. Ghislaine Maxwell has been convicted of grooming and trafficking underage girls for the financier Jeffrey Epstein. Let me bring you the detail of the 6 separate counts she was found guilty on. Count 1 of enticing a minor to travel to engage in illegal sex acts. Count 2 of transporting a minor with intent to engage in criminal sex acts. 1 count of sex trafficking of a minor and 3 counts of conspiracy relating to the above 3 charges. Because that verdict has come in, we understand she may now face 70 years in prison, effectively the rest of her life. She's also being tried separately on 2 other counts of perjury for allegedly lying under oath during a pair of depositions in 2016. This an extremely high-profile case that has captured the imaginations of people either side of the Atlantic. As I say, a British socialite and daughter of the late media tycoon Robert Maxwell, and perhaps more significantly than that, the former girlfriend of the disgraced Jeffrey Epstein, who died while awaiting trial in controversial circumstances in 2019. The defence in this case arguing that Ghislaine Maxwell was being tried in his absence and effectively was scapegoating for his crimes. But Ghislaine Maxwell is the news tonight here on GB News. Breaking within the last few minutes, she pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges and says she is a scapegoat for Jeffrey Epstein, who died in jail in 2019. We'll bring you more detail on that at the top of the hour.
So after the break, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. New research from South Africa shows that Omicron can boost immunity against the Delta variant of COVID. So I'm asking, is Omicron our saviour in the fight against COVID? This show is nothing without you, of course, so you can send me an email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Tell me what you think. You can also tweet at GBNews, and there's a poll up right now asking that very question, so cast your vote. But first, let's get the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves, there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there. Another mild day tomorrow. Still windy with some spells of rain, but some brighter breaks, particularly to the lee of higher ground towards the northeast. Low pressure firmly in charge. However, it's the wind direction which is determining how high the temperatures will be tomorrow. And we could see values coming in around 12 to 15 degrees Celsius, but it will be windy everywhere. and a breezy night tonight. Further spells of cloud and rain pushing up from the southwest, and this rain could turn heavy across the Midlands, Wales, northwest England. Further spells of rain for the north and the west of Scotland, particularly over the higher ground. We could see some high rainfall totals. All in all, it's a windy end to the night, a mild one. Also, we'll see further spells of rain. So a wet start to the day, particularly for England and Wales and Scotland. Rain clipping the far north of Northern Ireland just for a time. But notice an improvement coming in from the west as the rain clears towards the east. Still lingering on towards the more southern areas, outbreaks of rain continue and they will pep up as we head through the latter part of the day. Elsewhere, though, some brighter skies. Aberdeenshire down towards Northumberland, Derry as well as Antrim seeing some brighter weather to end the day. Now through Thursday evening and overnight, that rain, particularly across more western parts of the country, pushes ever northwards. The air remains mild wherever you are, and further rain returns to Wales as well as the West Country later. Spits and spots further east through the latter part of the night. We hang on to some drier weather across the far north of Scotland. That's where the lowest temperatures will be overnight. But it will be a mild start to the last day of 2021. Yes, some rain first thing and some stronger winds, but notice the rain will wane as we head through the morning and into the afternoon. Still lingering on across northern counties of England, but certainly some brighter skies through the latter part of the day as temperatures struggle a little bit across the far north, 9 degrees Celsius here, but still mild further south. And a bright, breezy and mild start to 2022. Bye-bye.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
A reminder of the breaking story this hour. British socialite Ghislaine Maxwell has been found guilty by a US jury of helping Jeffrey Epstein sexually abuse teenage girls. The 60-year-old has been convicted on 5 of the 6 counts. The ex-girlfriend of billionaire financier Epstein is now facing the prospect of years in prison. We'll have more on this story as soon as we can bring you up to date with it. But it's time right now for our Great British Debate and a new paper by South African scientists which shows that getting infected with the Omicron COVID variant can strengthen immunity against the Delta strain and decrease the likelihood of reinfection. So after 2 weeks of symptoms, immunity to further infections of Omicron rose 14-fold, and a smaller improvement was found against Delta. The study was carried out by South African-based Africa Health Research Institute. Here, one of the authors, Professor Alex Sigel, explains why the findings are such good news.
People that were infected with Omicron are less likely to be reinfected with Delta. But the opposite is unlikely to be true. So people that were infected with Delta are not necessarily protected from Omicron infection. And this probably tells us that Omicron is going to push Delta out. And that may be important, especially if Omicron gives rise to less severe disease.
We should say that study has not been peer-reviewed, but South African experts have been trying to hammer home for weeks now that Omicron, which was first found in the country, doesn't deserve its big, bad status. The doctor who uncovered it is Angelique Coetzee, and she had this to say on GBNews on Nigel Farage's show on December the 13th.
Are experiencing it as a much milder form. Remember, we also came out from the Delta wave. Delta is a scary variant. Doesn't matter how many times we are saying it's a mild disease, it seems to us that some scientists or some people doesn't really want to believe us, you know, and I've even been asked the question, am I not biased because I'm saying it is a mild disease? But go and look at our hospital stats.
Well, soon we'll hear what you think, but first, let's get an expert view. I'm joined by Sir Andrew McMichael, Professor of Immunology of Molecular Medicine at the University of Oxford. So, Andrew, first of all, welcome to the programme. Now, listening to this, for me, Omicron sounds like the answer. Why, you know, this is what they're saying. Can you sort of give us your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very encouraging and could be really good, but it is very early days. And we have to remember we've only known about this variant for about a month. And the number of patients studied in this South African study is only about 15. So it's quite a small number. And the time for developing immune response and then being reinfected, it must have been quite short. So I think we have to kind of look at it very carefully and see if we get more data of the same kind. But it is appearing that the disease caused by Omicron in this country is less severe, but we don't know whether that's because so many people are vaccinated or immune. So we really need to know how unvaccinated people react to both Omicron compared to Delta, I think.
I see. Because in South Africa, they had, only a 24% vaccination rate. So they didn't really have such a high rate of vaccination. And in their population, it doesn't appear to have been as deadly. So surely that would tell us quite a bit.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. They're also a younger population, so they would probably have less severe disease than our rather older population. So it may be absolutely right, but I think we just have to be a little bit cautious because the cost of getting this wrong is massive. You know, if we relax too early and we overwhelm the NHS by large numbers of people turning up in hospital and needing intensive care, then we're all going to be in trouble. I think that's unlikely, but it is a risk, and I think we have to bear that in mind.
Yeah, I hear it, but on the other hand, getting it wrong could also mean that you've put too many people away, so everyone's sort of locking down, like, say, in Scotland and say in Wales. In the end, Omicron doesn't get to spread the way it would do, and then Delta sort of has some other sort of mutation and then becomes the dominant variant again. Don't we want a weaker variant to become?
I think Omicron is spreading pretty wildly actually already, but we want to sort of keep the numbers to some sort of containable level so that we don't get, even if 1% of people end up in hospital, if we had 20 million infected, that would be 200,000 that would completely swamp all our health services. So I think we just have to be a little bit careful for a little bit longer. I mean, we're learning very fast, and I think in another 2 or 3 weeks, we'll be in a much better position to know whether this is all really true, that this is less serious and may, as you say, be the thing that's going to save us.
Yeah, but then when you say that 1%, but of a big number, it's actually quite a lot. But then, isn't it also true that we know that those who are unvaccinated are slightly disproportionately represented in hospitals, in the ICU departments? So that 1% surely should be taken more from those who are unvaccinated. I just feel that the number we seem to be justifying something that doesn't sound like any of that's going to come to fruition at all.
Well, I mean, there's still, I think, something like 15 to 20% of the population unvaccinated, unfortunately. And that's a lot of people. If you've got a population of 60 million, that's a lot. And if those were predominantly the ones infected and who got really sick, that could cause trouble. So we hope those people will get vaccinated as soon as possible, or if not, isolate really carefully, and that we can keep those numbers down to something manageable.
Will they? How soon do you think they'll have an update for a vaccine that is specifically targeted to Omicron? Or is there any point in doing that if we find that it is really a bit more of a saviour than anything else?
Well, I think there's a good point in doing it in case we need it. And it should only take about 3 months to get it ready to go. And I'm sure they're already working on it, both in the Oxford labs and in Moderna and Pfizer and all those companies. It's quite straightforward to do.
Yeah. So ultimately, do you think that Boris has made the right decision if you were to compare the decision to Scotland and Wales, where they are being a bit more restrictive?
Well, I'm a bit risk averse, so I would probably be more in line with the Scots. But he's taken a risk, and he may well get away with it, and we may all thank him for it. So we just have to see, I think, how it pans out.
Well, he's taken a risk, Professor. Thank you so much for joining me. That's Sir Andrew McMichael, who's Professor of Immunology of Molecular Medicine at the University of Oxford. We'll hear more of your views in a few minutes, but here's a taster of what you've been saying. Jane on GBNews says, if Omicron isn't our saviour, common sense should be. We cannot continue to live like this, obsessing about a respiratory virus that the vast majority were always going to survive. We need to get a grip. Well, we'll hear more of your thoughts, and I'll also ask my panel what they think after this short break.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good evening. It's just gone 39 minutes after 10 o'clock. I'm Nana Akweer. This is GB News. Back to our great British debate this hour. And I'm asking, is Omicron our saviour in the fight against COVID? It comes after a study by South African doctors found that Omicron gives some immunity against the previous COVID strain Delta and could ultimately push it out of circulation. So let's see what my panel make of the situation. Is it time we calm down and accepted that Omicron as a positive force that's boosting immunity of the population? So joining me, I have Nikki Hodgson, James Woodhousen and Jason Reed. I'm going to start with you, James. I don't know.
Well, I think Professor McMichael was right to be cautious. It's very early days. In fact, I read the sample size as 13, not 50.
Yeah, really?
And I think what this underlines for us, I mean, first of all, let's not talk about Omicron as a saviour, right? I mean, that it isn't. Could it, deal with the Delta virus and all of that? Yes, maybe, but it is early days. The striking thing for me about the whole affair is that I just wish we would stop using the definite article before the word science, because if you look at what's going on right now, it's very fluid. There's no the science. There's a lot of investigation that needs to be done. There's a lot of things we don't understand. With a sample of 13, it's obviously contestable.
Yeah.
So can we underline, please, for your viewers, that science is a debate. It's never fixed. It's never finished. One of the aspects that's not taken up is the Omicron news is all about antibodies. It's not about the other side of the equation with the virus,
and the T cells as well.
which is the T cells, right? It's not about the discussion so far about what they found out in South Africa is not about that. So we have to take a holistic view that sees science as fluid. And just one further illustration of that point. I mean, what do we really know from the media about antiviral drugs to treat people when they're in hospital or to stop them getting into hospital? There's virtually no discussion on that.
Well, they're not really being forthcoming about the information of anything to do with the hospitals in particular. How many people are actually in those hospitals and who got the COVID, whichever one it was, in the hospital or from, or where they caught it when they got there, were they asymptomatic? I mean, it's so vague. I'm beginning to think, are they hiding something? What's going on? Why is it so vague?
Well, there's always going to be a lapse between those numbers appearing and then them reporting them. And the NHS is quite... Well, we do, but the NHS is quite backwards in how it gathers data. I used to work for the NHS many years ago, so I'm very aware of the problems with reporting any kind of statistics and also with the numbers of people that get sick in hospital. Up until now, we often talked about the problems with sepsis, which is a very serious illness if you catch it. And, the numbers of people that catch that on NHS wards are just unacceptable. So, is it that people are catching COVID in hospital? Well, maybe it is, but what are we going to do about it? I mean, remember, the government is always very cautious in giving out data that is going to do down the NHS any more than, it kind of already has been through the pandemic. And they've always got to think of the response to data they give out. So it's not just about, well, we need to know this number because it'll help us feel better about, information. It's what will the public reaction be to it? And if it's going to affect the political polling, then they won't give it out.
But they won't even celebrate the good news, like antivirals. I mean, we could learn a lot about that, but we know nothing about it.
Yeah. Omicron on its own isn't a saviour, but all these things build up a broader picture, right, of protection against COVID, combined with vaccines, combined with jabs, combined with natural immunity. The problem is that because we have a government that's more concerned about where the next round of cheese and wine is coming from than doing any long-term planning on COVID, we keep getting blindsided by these very obvious and predictable developments, such as new variants coming along. We badly need some proper leadership, some long-term planning to help us come out the other side of the pandemic. James, you know about forecasting. Can't you help them out?
Well, it is easy to say that. It's very difficult to change the habits of Parliament and, political parties. And we all know this. We know that they're superficial. And then they go bowing and scraping to the real authorities, who are the scientists who must always be right. And, it's just such an unseemly spectacle really. No leadership, short-termism, as you say, and then abasement in front of people who we didn't elect.
But, I mean, we have had quite a few different takes on this. I mean, there was Dr. Eleanor Riley. She's a professor of immunology and disease at Edinburgh University, and she said, one of the things that she said, that it could potentially be that if it is more transmissible but also milder, then it could be act as a vaccine. So this is what she said, but obviously she said we do need to wait for more data. But that was a couple of weeks ago. In the papers, and this is pretty much quoting from what she said. But again, she did say that we need more time, and that was a few weeks ago. We've now got the time. There are 183,000 infections. 57 people have died of COVID. Now, that's obviously it's very distressing. 57 is a lot. If you're one of those, that's no good. But the numbers are not extraordinary, are they?
No, but the very esteemed professor from Oxford has said there, wait 2 to 3 more weeks. It's not a lot of time to wait, actually.
Well, I don't think it's a long time to wait, but I'm, we're looking at it as an overall picture, and lots of people have had this Omicron variant now and said that it's quite mild, and the reports from South Africa have said the same thing.
And a few months ago, we were planning for the most open and best Christmas ever, and all the adverts kind of portrayed that, and that didn't happen for people. So the point is that things can still move very quickly in a different direction.
We know that, but to me, this looks like a quite clear direction. I'm wondering why we're not getting the information as forthcoming. I mean, remember when it was this many people had died, this many people had died with COVID or of COVID, and we're not getting that information, and I don't understand why.
Well, you mentioned the backbenchers and so on. That's informing the way that the government is behaving. I think the real problem is that they're just not thinking about all of the downside of what they have done, and therefore they could revert at any time in the moment, in the future, for whenever the news gets bad, to their panic tactics. And that's very worrying. As you say, 57 deaths is 57 deaths too many. But we know, and I've said it on GB News before, 170,000 people die of cancer each year in this country. So can we please get it in proportion? But that's not how the government looks at things. It's not how the quote-unquote opposition looks at things.
Well, it just feels a bit like, I mean, yes, I understand at the beginning we had to do what we did. They were so slow to act. At the very beginning, it was unbelievable. Finally, they're acting at the pace that I think is probably correct, but we are now not being given the information that that would be useful to us. So I would want to know the ages roughly of the people who are in hospital. Do they have comorbidities? That's what we want to know. That these sort of factors. Did they catch COVID in the hospital, or did they go to hospital with COVID? Are they vaccinated? Are they unvaccinated? Are they boosted? This information is available. They have this information, even if it is slightly lagging. And I'm wondering why we're not hearing that.
I think there's something to be said for the fact that we do need to wean ourselves off this constant drip feed of information that we're getting. None of us have really had to go through a pandemic before in our lifetimes, and so we don't know how to deal with it, and we've become addicted to this rolling feed of vaccination numbers and case numbers and hospital numbers and death numbers and so on. At some point, we have to come out the other side of the pandemic. And there can be too much information. Of course, it should be in the public domain. We should know what's going on, but it doesn't need to be on the news 24 hours every day. We have to learn to live with COVID. We have to move on from COVID. And we can't do that if we keep obsessing over the numbers. And there's been an increase since last week. Is there another spike coming? Is this a new wave?
But you need the numbers to work out, how to act, right? So, and that helps us as a public. So we know how we can modify our behaviour to ensure that we don't make things worse.
But I think Jason's right.
You've got a point. You make a point. But at this point in time, this is where we want the information.
No, that's right.
This is the bit where we want the information. Before, when they were saying this many people died today, and this, to me, it was overkill. I couldn't listen to it all. But now we're at the point where, OK, it feels like it's time to start opening up. Can you give us all the information that we need to know so that we can make some decent decisions? And for me, it feels like that information isn't forthcoming.
That's right. We do need better information. I mean, I can't name the antivirals, right, the way you can Omicron or whatever. I think the other thing that needs saying is there's a medical agenda here, which we don't want to, just rush into the latest finding. 13 people in South Africa did OK. Great. Now, let it rip. That's not what we want to do. There's a medical agenda, which is always contestable. But there's a wider agenda, Nuka, which is, the government's very concerned to control the population.
You think?
And yeah, definitely, right? Because they know there's a lot of dissent out there. They know that people are very atomised. They know that a section has gone fairly loopy in lockdown. And they also know, I mean, it's coming up later, I know, that we're going to be hit with enormous energy bills, you know, in April, if not before. Now, that's going to lead to a lot more unrest.
Well, there's already unrest. I mean, for example, I mean, I know in Milton Keynes, even today, there was quite a bit of a scene there where people were completely not happy with that whole idea of lockdown. And I don't think that people will actually abide by another lockdown. I don't think that that's, you know, I think there's going to be a lot of people who just say, I'm sorry, but you can forget that.
Well, in that situation, you know, even unconsciously, there's a lot of cultivating of fear, because then we can, as a government, not me, but them, can enjoy a supine population that you only need another piece of obsessive data about something for everybody to sort of do lockdown voluntarily. And they've been quite successful in that, aided by the loyal opposition. So we do have to distinguish, not in a conspiratorial way, the medical agenda from the control agenda. Any government is concerned with control. Right now, across the West, there's less and less democracy. There's more and more state control.
Yeah.
It's a very worrying trend.
Well, the other thing is, if you look at it, and as you said, there's more state control. Now, businesses are saying, oh, well, if people aren't coming, we need some subsidies from the government and everything else like that, instead of how business works, which is, you know, whilst I do respect that they did not support businesses efficiently enough at the beginning of the pandemic, and I can't understand, I still cannot forgive them for not looking after the self-employed properly, and many people who had their own businesses, that's unforgivable. I don't know what these people lived on, and I'm impressed that they can continue to survive. But now we're at a point where these businesses are being left to slightly get on with their own devices. Now there's all this call for more support from the state again. And Nicola Sturgeon is, you know, flicking through those pages as though she's chucking money out.
But I think the biggest problem with that, and I speak as the wife of a hospitality owner, actually, and we've obviously been through the ringer the past couple of years, is that the support at the beginning was not great enough.
No.
The plug wasn't pulled quick enough. Everybody was hemorrhaging cash. And so now you have many, many extremely struggling businesses who, every time there's another bad news story, suffer a blow and get knocked back even further in their recovery. So the reason that they are still pushing for money is because they haven't even come back from the first wave of COVID.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think, I mean, that first COVID wave and the fact that they weren't helped out was just unforgivable. It frankly was. I don't really understand how the government has sort of got away with that. To me, I think then there needs to be some sort of compensation act.
Well, and they effectively blamed COVID, the spread of COVID at a certain point, on the hospitality industry, which we just knew was patently not true.
Well, I mean, the hospitality industry, probably the sector, would have been one of the places where it would have spread the most, but it's not.
But it wasn't
not their
primary.
fault.
It wasn't
not their fault.
Primary transmissions at one point during the pandemic were not solely happening throughout the hospitality industry, and they were used as a scapegoat.
Well, we'll carry on discussing all of that, but we're now going to return to our breaking news tonight on Ghislaine Maxwell. Let's cross to Polly Middlehurst.
Well, let's return to that breaking news that we've been receiving here at GB News within the last hour. As we've been reporting, the British socialite Ghislaine Maxwell has been convicted in New York of helping the American financier Jeffrey Epstein sexually abuse teenage girls. Well, joining us now to talk a bit more about this and analyse perhaps the reaction from it is Aric Fudali, partner and managing attorney of the Bloom firm, the firm that work with members of Epstein's victims. First of all, sir, your reaction?
You know, I'm happy to see the verdict. I'm happy to see that the jury got this right. You know, Jeffrey Epstein devastated the lives of countless women, and Ghislaine Maxwell helped facilitate that devastation. So I'm really pleased to hear that the jury got this right. I know it was very, very difficult for the victims to come forward, to withstand the cross-examination, to withstand the public scrutiny, to have all their flaws pointed out, and to get this guilty verdict and to get some semblance of justice here. I'm really proud for the victims.
Give us some sort of sense of the lead up to this and indeed the context in which this decision's been made.
Well, the jury really went through a very long deliberation. There was they requested almost every transcript from every witness. They requested evidence. They really had a very thorough analysis here. And it's tough. The American criminal justice system with the burden of beyond a reasonable doubt, it makes it difficult for prosecutors to get guilty verdicts. And Ghislaine certainly had a very capable defense team. So, it was certainly a long period for the victims to wait. But I ultimately think the jury absolutely got this one right.
When you say it was very difficult for the jury to reach a verdict, as I understand it, even if there had been one of them who didn't agree, we could have had a mistrial.
That's correct, but especially there's rules vary from federal court to state court, but that's correct. And it looks like here we had a unanimous verdict, and that there was 5 counts of guilty and 1 count of not guilty. What's interesting is the 1 not guilty count was related to enticement of Jane. However, the jury did find guilty of transportation of Jane. So very little interesting discrepancy there. Perhaps it had to do with the definition of the word entice, which can be difficult.
There's been much analysis, hasn't there, of the conditions in which Ghislaine Maxwell has been held in jail since July 2020 in fairly austere conditions, in a room on her own, checked every 15 minutes by her guards, given paper clothing to wear, a toilet in the room in full view of cameras without a toilet seat. These sort of indignities were part of the defence's arguments that she was being scapegoated for the crimes actually committed by Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, that was certainly part of the defense throughout the trial, that we were blaming, the prosecution didn't get their chance at Epstein, so they're just blaming a woman instead. But, clearly that wasn't the case, and that's not what the evidence presented, because the jury found that Ghislaine Maxwell was not a scapegoat, but that Ghislaine Maxwell helped facilitate and in fact participated in the sex trafficking scheme of Jeffrey Epstein. So that certainly was the defense, and the defense went so far as to defend Jeffrey Epstein himself. At one point, they called him the 21st century James Bond, which I thought was a pretty absurd comparison. But yeah, the jury didn't buy what the defense was saying, and they found that Ghislaine Maxwell is a convicted felon and a sex trafficker.
Eric, just one last question. In your view, knowing what you know about this case, what do you think was it that made the jury find her guilty on these 5 out of 6 counts?
That's a great question. And I think it's a simple answer, though. I think it's the victim's testimony. The victims really came forward very bravely, despite having their own flaws and despite having all those flaws put out there for the jury to hear. They came forward, they looked at the attorneys in the eyes, they told their story, and I really think that was compelling. It was brave. And I think the jury being able to hear it from the victims, hear it directly, what happened to them, what they went through, what they experienced at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, I really think they seemed credible. They seemed forthcoming, and I think that went a long way in getting a guilty verdict here.
Absolutely fascinating to talk to you. Eric Vidali, thank you very much for your time at such short notice. We appreciate you joining us. And indeed, if you have just joined us on GB News, just to remind you, Ghislaine Maxwell, the British socialite and daughter of the media tycoon Robert Maxwell, has been found guilty in a court in New York of 5 out of 6 counts of grooming underage girls for the financier Jeffrey Epstein. That verdict just through today within the last half hour. We'll have more detail at the top of the hour. Right now, back to Nana Akweer.
Well, if you've just tuned in, welcome on board. You're watching me, Nana Akweer. This is GB News. Time for a short break, but first, let's get an update with the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there. Another mild day tomorrow. Still windy with some spells of rain, but some brighter breaks, particularly to the lee of higher ground towards the northeast. Low pressure firmly in charge. However, it's the wind direction which is determining how high the temperatures will be tomorrow. And we could see values coming in around 12 to 15 degrees Celsius, but it will be windy everywhere. And a breezy night tonight. Further spells of cloud and rain pushing up from the southwest. And this rain could turn heavy across the Midlands, Wales, northwest England. Further spells of rain for the north and the west of Scotland, particularly over the higher ground. We could see some high rainfall totals All in all, it's a windy end to the night, a mild one. Also, we'll see further spells of rain. So a wet start to the day, particularly for England and Wales and Scotland. Rain clipping the far north of Northern Ireland just for a time. But notice an improvement coming in from the west as the rain clears towards the east. Still lingering on towards the more southern areas, outbreaks of rain continue and they will pep up as we head through the latter part of the day. Elsewhere, though, some brighter skies. Aberdeenshire down towards Northumberland, Derry as well as Antrim seeing some brighter weather to end the day. Now through Thursday evening and overnight, that rain, particularly across more western parts of the country, pushes ever northwards. The air remains mild wherever you are and further rain returns to Wales as well as the West Country later. Spits and spots further east through the latter part of the night. We hang on to some drier weather across the far north of Scotland. That's where the lowest temperatures will be overnight. But it will be a mild start to the last day of 2021. Yes, some rain first thing and some stronger winds, but notice the rain will wane as we head through the morning and into the afternoon. Still lingering on across northern counties of England, but certainly some brighter skies through the latter part of the day as temperatures struggle a little bit across the far north, 9 degrees Celsius here, but still mild further south. And a bright, breezy and mild start to 2022. Bye-bye.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Nana Aquir. It's just gone 11 o'clock, and for this hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of those big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is author and dating expert Nikki Hodgson, trends guru James Woodhousen, who is a visiting professor of forecasting and innovation at the London South Bank University, and political commentator Jason Reed of Young Voices UK. Still to come, we'll put the spotlight on the royal family. We've had a very eventful Christmas, to say the least, and this week I'm joined by commentator Charles Ray to track the highs and lows of the Windsor's festive break. Plus, as the cost of living rises, can we actually afford to go green? From electric cars to heat pumps and paying tax to upgrade our institutions, are we expecting too much of Joe Public? And of course, I want to hear your thoughts. You can email me now, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Why not send us a tweet at gbnews? But first, let's get to your latest headlines.
Good evening, I'm Polly Middlehurst with your news at 11 o'clock. And the breaking news this hour is that Ghislaine Maxwell has been found guilty of recruiting underage girls to be sexually abused by Jeffrey Epstein in a court in New York. The 60-year-old British socialite was convicted on 5 of the 6 counts. The former girlfriend of the billionaire financier Jeffrey Epstein is now facing the prospect of 70 years in prison, effectively the rest of her life. During the court case in New York, she was labelled dangerous by the prosecution during her 3-week trial, helping to entice vulnerable teenagers to Epstein's various properties for him to be sexually abused by him between 1994 and 2004. If you watch any news channel tonight, the news will be the same. Ghislaine Maxwell is guilty on 5 of the 6 charges that were presented to the New York court today. She showed no emotion, apparently, sipping from a glass of water. She wore a black face mask in a black jersey. As she learned of her fate, one of her lawyers put his arm around her and she was led away from the court quietly. 4 women had testified at Ghislaine Maxwell's trial in New York about the abuse they had suffered. And she had pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges, with her defence team arguing she was, in fact, a scapegoat for the crimes of Jeffrey Epstein, who you can see she is pictured with here at various locations around the world. She was denied bail and held in a jail cell since July 2020 without the chance of any bail, with the worry about her being a flight risk with her international connections and her millions of pounds that was hidden away in foreign bank accounts and her wealthy and influential friends. But that is the news tonight. Ghislaine Maxwell has been convicted of grooming and trafficking underage girls for the financier Jeffrey Epstein. Well, in other news tonight, the UK has reported a record 183,000 new daily COVID cases. Doctors have also advised the Prime Minister that 90% of people being treated in intensive care have not received their booster vaccine. Boris Johnson's therefore urging people to get the jab so they can enjoy New Year. 800,000 boosters were recorded across the Christmas period. Meanwhile, pharmacists are reporting a problem with shortages of lateral flow tests, saying there were requests every 5 minutes over the Christmas period. The Association of Independent Multiple Pharmacies is warning of patchy supplies following a change in self-isolation rules. But the UK Health Security Agency says almost 8 million test kits will be made available to pharmacies by New Year's Eve. And in Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon says she won't be introducing further coronavirus restrictions because hospital cases have remained broadly stable. The First Minister adding she expects, however, a steep increase in cases over the coming weeks. Scots are also being urged not to travel to England for New Year's Eve, where clubs are still open.
And it's also why over Hogmanay and New Year's Day, and for at least the first week of January, we are advising everyone to stay at home more than normal, to reduce contacts with people outside our own households, and to limit the size of any indoor social gatherings that do take place so that they don't include people from any more than 3 households.
Nicola Sturgeon. Meanwhile, in France, 2 people are testing positive for COVID every second. That's according to the country's health minister, who also said France had reported its record daily high of 208,000 new cases. That's up from 180,000 yesterday. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization are becoming increasingly concerned about the uptick in global cases.
Delta and Omicron are twin threats that are driving up cases to record numbers. I'm highly concerned that Omicron, being more transmissible, circulating at the same time as Delta, is leading to a tsunami of cases.
That's all from me. Now back to Nana Akweer.
Well, as we've been reporting, Ghislaine Maxwell has been found guilty of helping the late financier Jeffrey Epstein sexually abuse teenage girls. Meanwhile, a 2009 settlement agreement between Epstein and Virginia Giuffre, which bears directly on Ms. Giuffre's civil lawsuit accusing Prince Andrew of sexual abuse, will be made public early next week. Virginia Giuffre is suing the Queen's son for allegedly sexually assaulting her when she was a teenager. Prince Andrew denies all the allegations made against him. So joining me now is Charles Ray. He's the former royal correspondent at The Sun. So welcome, Charles. Really good to talk to you. Now, I want to talk about this whole Epstein business because a 2009 settlement between Epstein and Virginia Giuffre will be made public. What would that mean, though, for Prince Andrew if this happens?
Well, he is going to be hoping that this is a get-out-of-jail-free card, to be perfectly honest, because this agreement between Epstein and Virginia Giuffre was in return for, I think, a six-figure sum, and in it was supposed to say things like that anybody she was threatening to sue would be covered by this agreement and she wouldn't be able to sue them. Now, there's a phrase in there that includes the word royalty. And we'll have to wait and see the actual details when it's released. I think it's going to be released on January the 3rd. So we'll have to wait and see what it actually says. But he's going to be hoping that this will cover him and give him an out. And this is one of two things he's trying to do. As you know, Nana, he has been trying to get this case thrown out using various tactics and various claims. And the judge, Lewis Kaplan, has thrown them all out. Now, this is another one which will be he's due. His lawyers are due to address the court on January the 4th to get the case against Prince Andrew thrown out, and they'll also be using some bizarre. When I saw it this morning, I couldn't believe it. That the case should fall because as she now lives in Australia, then there's no jurisdiction for this case to go ahead, which is ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous.
So do you think that we could actually see Prince Andrew himself giving evidence in this case, or are there so many different twists and turns that actually it looks like he might get out of it?
I think, well, there are twists and turns, and so far the judge has rejected everyone. We'll have to wait and see now if these two latest attempts on January the 4th, what Lewis Kaplan will do, and if he decides to throw them out, as he has done with all the others. Prince Andrew will have to face this civil action, and he will have to give evidence via a Zoom link sometime in the autumn, which is going to be very, very embarrassing.
Yeah, to say the least. Well, I mean, let's move on then, because let's talk the Windsor intruder now. Newspaper reports suggest that the intruder on Christmas Day was actually attempting to kill the Queen. Is that what you're hearing?
Well, yes. I mean, that's what the word is coming out. This man had a crossbow, and he'd thrown a rope ladder over the wall on the Long Walk. Realistically, the police did their job. He was spotted on CCTV. Police were sent to the spot, arrested him, and I think he was tasered straight away. So, within seconds, a minute or so, he was captured, and the chap is now has been sectioned and will undergo mental examination. I think there will be a review of security, not because the police failed. Clearly, the police did their job and did it correctly. But when you have an incident like this, particularly involving a member of the royal family, there is always a review to make sure that any little loopholes are plugged up.
Priti Patel's looking at the review on the laws for crossbows. I mean, do you know what those laws are? Can anyone use one?
Well, the only thing I know, Nana, is basically you and I, if we wanted to get a crossbow, we could just go online and get it, basically, and it will be delivered to your home. There are no legal rules about crossbows, which is absolutely surprising, given that these are and can be lethal weapons. Now, I saw a lady on television in an interview the other day whose husband was killed by a next-door neighbour with a crossbow, and in a murder, and she is campaigning to get these things banned or more legal constraints on how you can purchase them.
Unbelievable that would be such a huge loophole for them to sort of miss, and the fact that you could just order one online and then just go out with one.
You could get one. You can get one. You can get one tonight quite easily if you so wish, man.
No, thank you. Let's not give people ideas, for goodness sake.
just don't ask me to put an apple on my head. That's all.
Yeah. Wow. And do we have any information on Meghan and Harry? I know I'm going off piste here, but do we have any updates with them?
No, they seem to have been, for a change, relatively quiet. It's going to be interesting next year. I'm joining the small band of people who believe that Meghan will never return to this country at all for any reason. And it'll be interesting because the Queen has announced that there's going to be a Thanksgiving service for her late husband, Prince Philip, sometime in the spring, and you would expect all members of the royal family to be there. For obvious reasons, and I would expect Harry to be there. Big question mark on whether Meghan will make it. To be perfectly honest, I mean, we saw a Christmas card from them. That's the last thing we saw. Really nice picture. For the very first time, we've actually seen what the kids look like, which is quite nice.
But there was criticism of the Queen's speech as well. That a lot of people were saying that she didn't really.
For a start, why would she didn't mention Prince Andrew either? So you could also say, well, she hasn't mentioned some members of. She mentioned the working members of the royal family, and I think the speech was quite right and correct. It was a deeply personal and poignant speech, reflecting on her long marriage to Prince Philip. And as we saw on her desk, this always brings up comment. There was only one picture there, which was of her and Prince Philip. Now, these pictures are arranged, for different Queen speeches as to what she's likely to talk about. There's no reason why she should have mentioned Harry and Meghan. They are no longer working members of the royal family.
Well, listen, Charles, it's always great to get an update from you. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. As Charles Ray, he's a former royal correspondent to The Sun. Right, so Jason, what do you think of this? You're quite young. I just noticed your nail varnish. What were you thinking? Lift them up to the camera. Show them his. Look at his.
Second time I've had to do that on this show.
Did you paint them yourself?
I did. Yeah, it's quite badly done. That's why.
So, what do you think? Then you're quite young. The whole royal family business. Do you see a proper future for the royal family?
I think it's hard to say. We're all praying that the day never comes when the Queen passes, but when that does come, there will be a moment of reckoning, I think, for the future of the monarchy in this country. I don't think it's necessarily entirely clear that everyone is going to accept and welcome Charles with the same fervour that they do with the Queen, because his character doesn't carry the same gravitas that the Queen does. And I wouldn't be surprised if in my lifetime we see the beginning of the end of the monarchy.
Beginning of the end, you do. Thanks, we've already seen. What do you think?
Gosh, why are we still asking this question? I can't even believe that we still have a monarchy. I mean, it's just so ridiculous to me. It's not about the family. It's not about the individual members and any work they do for charity or in any work they do in the community. I don't think anyone could say that William and Kate do, bad work. They don't. They do great work. They're obviously very compassionate, and they're obviously, they're valuable as humans that are compassionate are valuable. But the idea that we still as taxpayers pay for their upkeep, for their maintenance...
Not very much, though. Each person pays minimal.
But that's not the point. It's the principle of us paying for an unelected ruling body yes, we are a democracy, but they still have a function which far surpasses what it should be at this point in history.
Well, look at our elected ones. I mean, they're worse. What do you think?
They are bad, but, that's no excuse for, gazumping democracy, which is what you're talking about. They are unelected. Personally, they can be fine. Not in the case of Prince Andrew. He's really scraping the bottom of the barrel to try to drag up Victoria Giuffre in being in Australia. He must be desperate. I think the good news is no news for Meghan and Harry.
Oh, thank
that's the best news that they've made.
Hallelujah! Oh, my goodness!
The second piece of news is maybe she's never going to come to the UK
I don't think
again.
She'll be. I don't think she'll be welcome.
I also think is good. So, the institution is contemptible. And I'm wishing it was the end, not the beginning of the end.
Really? No, I'm afraid I can't support any of you with that.
Well, the prediction I made was a solemn one. I'm not delighted about the end of the monarchy. I'm surprised that we've got a consensus forming over on that part of the
that part of the part, not here, no. I think the Queen's fabulous. I hope the royal family continue.
But you've got to distinguish between the individual and the office.
You're talking about Prince Charles, aren't you?
I'm talking about the office, you know.
Yeah. Well, listen, still to come. On the latest, we'll update you the Ghislaine Maxwell verdict. First, let's get another update with the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there. Another mild day tomorrow. Still windy with some spells of rain, but some brighter breaks, particularly to the lee of higher ground towards the northeast. Low pressure firmly in charge. However, it's the wind direction which is determining how high the temperatures will be tomorrow. And we could see values coming in around 12 to 15 degrees Celsius, but it will be windy everywhere. And a breezy night tonight. Further spells of cloud and rain pushing up from the southwest. And this rain could turn heavy across the Midlands, Wales, northwest England. Further spells of rain for the north and the west of Scotland, particularly over the higher ground. We could see some high rainfall totals. All in all, it's a windy end to the night, a mild one. Also, we'll see further spells of rain. So a wet start to the day, particularly for England and Wales and Scotland. Rain clipping the far north of Northern Ireland just for a time. But notice an improvement coming in from the west as the rain clears towards the east. Still lingering on towards the more southern areas, outbreaks of rain continue and they will pep up as we head through the latter part of the day. Elsewhere, though, some brighter skies, Aberdeenshire down towards Northumberland, Derry as well as Antrim seeing some brighter weather to end the day. Now through Thursday evening and overnight, that rain, particularly across more western parts of the country, pushes ever northwards. The air remains mild wherever you are and further rain returns to Wales as well as the West Country later. Spits and spots further east through the latter part of the night. We hang on to some drier weather across the far north of Scotland. That's where the lowest temperatures will be overnight. But it will be a mild start to the last day of 2021. Yes, some rain first thing and some stronger winds, but notice the rain will wane as we head through the morning and into the afternoon. Still lingering on across northern counties of England, but certainly some brighter skies through the latter part of the day as temperatures struggle a little bit across the far north, 9 degrees Celsius here, but still mild further south. And a bright, breezy and mild start to 2022. Bye-bye.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Good evening. It's just fast approaching 24 minutes after 11 o'clock. I'm Nana Akwe. This is GB News. We're now going to return to our breaking news tonight. Ghislaine Maxwell has been found guilty of helping. Here's Polly Middlehurst.
Good evening. The British socialite Ghislaine Maxwell has been found guilty by a US court of helping Jeffrey Epstein sexually abuse teenage girls. The 60-year-old and ex-girlfriend of billionaire financier Jeffrey Epstein has been convicted on 5 out of 6 counts and is now facing the prospect of up to 65 years in jail. Let's get some analysis on this now. I'm joined by Anne Bremner, trial attorney and legal analyst, who's providing expert analysis on this case throughout. Thanks very much for joining us, Anne. First of all, your reaction.
Thank you. Well, I'm not surprised. The only thing I'm surprised about is the fact that she was acquitted on one of the counts. But that makes a little sense that it dealt with basically trafficking in between states, and maybe they just didn't have enough evidence on that. But I'm not surprised by the conviction. There's a lot of evidence against her.
There were rumours there could have been a mistrial. There seemed to be an element of nervousness emitting, certainly from those surrounding the judge, when you started to hear that she was asking people to stay an hour later on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. Did you think a mistrial was a possibility?
Well, I did, because think about also the COVID rate in Manhattan, where this courthouse is, the federal courthouse. And then you've also got the fact that the judge wanted the jurors to deliberate maybe to the weekend and through a holiday. You'll always get at least 1 or 2 jurors that balk at that. And so if you don't have all 12 jurors, they're all sick given the case, then you can't have a verdict and you have to start over. So that factor was clearly there, but of course abated because they reached a verdict.
And of course, the judge commenting on the astronomical, I think that was the word she used, spike in COVID-19 cases in New York. The worry was that so many jury members would have to quarantine, and that was a distinct possibility. What was it, do you think, that made the jury come to this decision now? We were expecting this to last a few more days, weren't we?
Well, yes, we were. But the thing is, when you're up against Christmas, you're up against New Year's, you're up against any kind of a holiday, jurors will basically come to a decision a lot more quickly. They'll compromise a little bit more. They're told to do that in the jury instructions. As long as it doesn't invoke some violence against your own beliefs about the evidence in the case, you're encouraged as a juror to compromise and reach a verdict in the United States. And apparently that's what they did. You know, time was a wasting. They'd actually deliberated quite a while. They'd asked for transcripts in this case. You know, they'd asked for different items of evidence. They were very careful in their deliberations, and they were ready.
A little bit more about the case itself. We heard, didn't we, from four people who said they'd been abused by Jeffrey Epstein at the hands of Ghislaine Maxwell during their time with the socialite and her boyfriend. What was it like when the jury heard those testimonies, and what was the atmosphere like in court?
Nobody likes to hear about child abuse, and 18 is a minor in the United States. When you talk about trafficking charges, trafficking can also be of adults, but we had a 14-year-old. And what happened in this case was horrific. All of the hundreds of times these young women were abused, they were vulnerable. They were groomed by Ghislaine Maxwell. I mean, she took them to Jeffrey Epstein, and she sexually abused these young girls herself. but they're young women now. And like the prosecutor said in their closing argument, they banked on them being vulnerable, proud, I think was the word she used, that wouldn't come forward and testify against Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. But they grew into young women, and here they are, and they came into a courtroom.
The women that we've heard a lot from over the last few months is one Virginia Giuffre. She has just within the last few minutes tweeted, and if I can read this out for you, Anne, and then ask for your reaction. Virginia Giuffre has just tweeted, "My soul yearned for justice for years, and today the jury gave me just that. I will always remember this day. Having lived the horrors of Maxwell's abuse, my heart goes out to the many other girls and young women who suffered at her hands and whose lives she destroyed." And in a second tweet, but of course Twitter is capped on how many characters you can use, so she's gone over into another tweet. Giuffre continues, "I hope that today is not the end, but rather another step in justice being served. Maxwell did not act alone. Others must be held accountable. I have faith they will be." I think we all know what she's referring to there, don't we, Anne?
We do. Yes, we do. Of course, Prince Andrew, which she's referring to, and also Alan Dershowitz, in terms of the civil complaints that she's filed in this case, the civil complaint naming them. And of course, Prince Andrew has been served, properly so, in the United Kingdom. And we don't know if there would be anything criminally coming forth. But the fact is, she's been very vocal, she's been very brave, and she's indicated who abused her. And she wasn't abused just by Jeffrey Epstein. She wasn't abused just by Ghislaine Maxwell. He didn't testify in this trial, as we know. But she has made accusations, and the case is now in suit.
She's made many accusations, and of course, Prince Andrew and his legal team vehemently deny all the accusations that have been made against them. Let's make that completely clear, and let's underline that this story tonight is about Ghislaine Maxwell and what's happened in New York and the court case there. So let's, for now, focus on that. And if we can, talk a little bit about the defence team, who spent quite a lot of time talking about Ghislaine Maxwell being scapegoated for the crimes of Jeffrey Epstein.
They did, and they talked a lot about the fact that she was basically tried by proxy, that she was standing in the place of Jeffrey Epstein. There was a portrait of Jeffrey Epstein in the courthouse that they asked to have taken down. They didn't want his specter, over like a shadow over the courtroom. And they said his shadow was there, but it wasn't fair to blame him or blame her for his crime. But the fact was, he was a partner in crime, according to the prosecutors, that she was with him in lockstep through all of this. She enabled him, she participated, and she was a co-conspirator. And she sexually trafficked young women. And that's what the counts involved. It was sex trafficking of young women. Some were very young, as the 14-year-old that we heard about, and some were older. But the fact is, they all grew into women, older women, that had the bravery to come forth in a federal courtroom and accuse her. Interestingly, when the verdict came in, at least from what I saw, she didn't really react. In a way, she knew.
And that's the verdict tonight that people will be digesting, analysing, no doubt all over the international newspapers tomorrow. What about sentencing, Anne? When can we expect that?
The judge didn't set a sentencing date today, but it will be sent shortly. The judge will ask for a pre-sentence report that will go through her history, her social history, other factors to consider in sentencing. But in the federal system, there are guidelines, almost like mathematical guidelines for sentencing. In this case, the counts will be consecutive counts of punishment. They won't be served at the same time. They'll be served stacked in a way. So she's looking at 65 to 70 years in the federal prison for these crimes in her sentence.
Anne Bremner, we appreciate your time reacting there to the decision in New York. Thank you, Anne. Reacting there to the decision in New York that has been given out this evening that Ghislaine Maxwell has been convicted of grooming and trafficking underage girls for the financier Jeffrey Epstein, guilty on 5 out of 6 counts. Now back to Nana Akwe.
Right, so thank you for that update, Polly. It's time for our Great British Debate this hour. Is the cost of going green too high? As energy prices and the overall cost of living rises, It's set to get harder for the British public to go green. We're being urged to invest in heat pumps, electric cars, and as taxpayers to stump up cash to overhaul our institutions. So today it's reported that the Scottish public is set to foot an £800,000 bill to make Nicola Sturgeon's official residence eco-friendly. And the cost of doing the same to St Andrew's House, the administrative heart of the Scottish Government, would exceed £5 million. So I'm joined by Donna McCarthy, climate columnist at the Independent. Hello, Donica. Welcome to the programme. I'm also joined by Dr. Bing Jones. We'll be talking to him from Insulate Britain. So I want to ask you then, first of all, we're being asked to do a lot of things, and it does seem like it's going to cost us a lot of money. Is this really a realistic objective that we're trying to reach?
Well, some things will cost us money, and some things will save us money. Some things will make us healthier. Some things will actually make our quality of life better. But what we have to remember is the price of doing nothing is absolutely terrifying. I don't know if you picked up on the news today, but the actual weather temperature in Alaska today is 19 degrees centigrade. That's 7 degrees centigrade higher than any record in history. We are now in the middle of a catastrophe, and if we don't act, in the words of the Prime Minister, we're facing a red code disaster, and in David Attenborough's words, the collapse of civilization. So if we don't act, the price is just unimaginable.
But what can we realistically do? So we are just the United Kingdom. We're coming up with this the heat pumps starts insulating our homes. This would be a minimal change, wouldn't it, to the climate, if anything?
Well, the thing is, humanity is made up of 8 billion people. Each of us has a carbon emission. But if you add them up, it comes up to the global emissions. So Britain, for example, is responsible for 15% of global investment in fossil fuels. And if we could change that investment to investing in a green economy, that actually wouldn't cost the public much money, but actually would mean that we're investing in a positive future rather than a damaging future. And if we do that globally, that £5 trillion of investment, that's going to new fossil fuels over the next 10 years, should be invested in the new economy. And that would actually reduce the cost for the public at large.
Well, this whole green thing sounds a bit dubious to me, though, because when I look at the cost of an electric car, so let's take an electric car. You've got the car, the battery will last, 7 or 8 years. Then you've got the lithium and all the other bits and pieces that go with that car. You're going to have to replace the entire thing because people don't often just change a battery. So there's a cycle of churn of metals and, and then the actual infrastructure as well. I can't see it.
Well, I agree with you that actually, ideally, we don't want people to switch from fossil fuel cars, everybody to switch to electric cars. What we need to do in our cities is to move away from cars and move to public transport, cycling, active travel, and actually create cities like in Holland where are more human-friendly rather than depending on cars. So I'm with you on that. Although I would say that the price of electric vehicles is coming down, just like mobile phones did. When I was younger, a mobile phone was only owned by celebrities because they were £1,500 each. Now every kid on the block has a mobile phone because mass production reduces the cost. And the same will happen with heat pumps. The more they're used, same with solar. When I put solar into my house in '98, it was around £10,000 per kilowatt. It's now around £900 per kilowatt, come down by a factor of 10. So that's what happens when you kick in a new economy, a new industry, new technology. With mass adoption, the price collapses.
Yeah, I would like to believe that, but I'm looking at the price of electricity and gas, and we're all using it, and it's not coming down. Donica, thank you so much for joining us. He's the climate columnist at the Independent. Right, I'm also now joined by Dr. Bing Jones from Insulate Britain. Dr. Bing, welcome to the programme. Good to talk to you. Right, I'm going to be talking to... Oh, there you are. So talk to me about Insulate Britain, because, to be honest, your mission is not something that the public would probably disagree with. It's more the tactics that are being used. What would you say to people who look at this whole idea? We all want to be greener and insulate our homes, but it seems a bit unaffordable.
Well, yes. Now, this Scottish thing is quite an interesting idea, isn't it? Their building is going to cost £5.8 million to insulate properly, and they may even need to build a new building. This just brings forward the fact that this is we need massive change. Insulation is a good start, though. People can understand insulation. People have massive bills. It's quite likely with inflation and fuel prices that the average bill will be doubled fairly soon. And the Scottish government is actually beginning to address this in a way which the UK government is not. We have got to insulate homes. There's just no way around it. And insulation is something that people can understand. It's going to make for a great deal of reduction of emissions, lots of really good jobs, and it's going to save vast amounts of money in terms of health also. There are 8,000, maybe even 10,000 people that are going to die this winter from cold. In Scotland, 1 in 4 children lives in fuel poverty. And these are all things that insulation can address.
Insulation is incredibly expensive. I'm going to ask you, though, because is your home insulated? I just have to check.
Well, my home is insulated, yes. Like most people, it's insulated to some extent. But it could be insulated so much more. And the biggest crime is that we're still building houses which are not insulated adequately. And so we're going to have to retrofit them all. None of this is just a job that has to be done. We've heard today that typhoons are going to be, these really bad hurricanes are going to be extending into wider areas. Christian Aid today has talked about Hurricane Ida costing $65 billion. That's just one storm over a day or so. The cost of climate change is enormous. The climate crisis, it's not change, it's a crisis. And we have to start addressing it. And the UK has to start, and insulation and making houses and buildings, government buildings, better for heating is just the place to start. So it's a good story, and it's something we're going to have to address. It's expensive, but we're going to have to do it.
Well, listen, Doctor, thank you so much for joining us. Really good to talk to you. That's Dr. Bing from Insulate Britain. Now, lots more still to debate in this hour, so stay with us. We'll see you after this.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Right, so welcome on board if you just joined us. This is GB News. I am Nana Akwe. We are discussing the green agenda and whether it's just way too expensive. I've got my panel joining me now. So you heard what the experts thought about this. There's, what are you laughing at? I mean, Donica seems, he sort of said that, yes, we've got to do something. It's important that we do something. Dr. Bing-Jones kind of, in a sense, agreed with them as well. But what is your take on this whole planetary issue, this whole going green? I mean, it's so expensive, insulating your home.
Yeah, I suppose the problem is, from the public's perspective, you can't, as a minister or a set of ministers, come in with some policies that are all very well-meaning and that we need to affect now, and then say you're the ones that have to pay for it. We've messed up, we haven't planned properly, we haven't maybe argued hard enough at Glasgow, but you're the people that will have to pay. And that's the problem that all the ministers who are dealing with climate issues at the moment are having. Because we know on a practical level, yes, of course, people should care about their emissions and care deeply about the planet, because of course it affects everybody. Even though we know that, emissions from factories, etc., from industry are the things that are really tipping the dial, but we all have a role to play. So it's a mindset shift that we need.
Do you think, does this not look a bit like window dressing? What are your thoughts on this, James?
Well, I note that Nicola Sturgeon believes that all the buildings in Scotland can be guilty of zero emissions if she merely spends £33 billion between now and 2030. It kind of puts in perspective the 800 grand on Butte House, it's chicken feed, really. £33 billion. What could Scotland do with that money if it wasn't spent on retrofitting insulation in really drafty homes? What Scotland needs is more new homes with insulation built in from the start. I'm told that's a legal requirement in England anyway. So it's not the case that new homes are not built with any of this. What is the case is that going into families' homes and putting up insulation and all the wool and all the rest of it, knocking about with lofts, getting them out of the house and clearing out their furniture so you can do it all, it's an enormously disruptive process. It's very intrusive and it destroys people's private life. It will be extremely expensive. If you're worried about retrofitting, you'll look at Obama's weatherizing program, a verb that you can only encounter in America. And it was mainly staffed by ex-convicts, and it would have taken more than 100 years for him to release even the poverty-stricken in America from their problems with insulation. So what we really need is new energy supply, not Band-Aid on old houses, and we need a lot more new and good houses.
New, good houses, proper insulation. These seem like obvious things anyway. Nothing new there. What about the whole idea of the electric car, though?
Well, this is the thing. We're obsessing over electric cars, and meanwhile, China is building a new coal mine every 5 minutes. Everyone in the world is laughing at us. You were saying before, Nikki, about perhaps we didn't argue enough at COP26. All that would have resulted in is more commitments. All will have net zero by 2050, and now it's 2045, and now it's 2040. Look at all these commitments I'm making. Aren't I impressive? But we're the ones who are going to be footing the bill and who are going to have all these new restrictions and these new taxes to disincentivize us from flying and to encourage us to switch to electric cars. We're the ones who have to pay for it.
Well, I don't want an electric car, I'm sorry. I'm not convinced at all. I mean, OK, have you seen the prices of electric? They're telling you now that your electricity and gas are suddenly about to skyrocket.
But that's also to do with global prices rising. That's not to do with global policy.
Whatever it's to do with that. So the fact that we're supposed to be transferring from one fuel to another, and it's supposed to be efficient, irrespective of the reasoning, which they always change anyway, because when the wholesale price falls, we don't get the benefit anyway. So the fact it's rising, they're just simply charging us more. Then you've got to plug in your electric car into that electric thing. I'm sorry, I'm not buying it. What about biodiesel? What happened to that? Biodiesel, using vegetable oil, using the current stuff that we have, the cars that we have now, and I think the byproduct is...
A bit like Prince Charles's car that runs on English wine and whey.
Well, that's a bit, just makes more sense. I don't really...
Absolutely brilliant.
You couldn't make it up,
makes more sense to me. I don't understand why we're all going to be ripping out the infrastructure around us, putting these charging points here. I mean, think of all the plastics and the metals and everything else like that.
Well, it's like the Industrial Revolution. When we wanted electricity, we had to change things. It's just part of evolution.
Yeah, but is it the right thing? Is it the right thing to do? Yes, I agree. Yeah, let's make things better. But is that actually better?
I think we have to accept that the drive for electric cars is really a drive to stop us driving at all. Right? If you look at Extinction Rebellion, they don't even want new electric cars.
No, I don't want electric cars. I agree with them.
No, but they don't want people to move around except through public transport, which we know is wonderful in this country, and except through cycling and walking. So it's basically the same with the government on hospitality. It is a crackdown on the fun in life, on moving around in life, on in drinking in pubs, having fun in music centres, driving where you want to, when you want to, and all of those things. You know, the question you've asked, Nana, is, you know, are electric cars, is it costing too much to go green? But I think what we need to remember is that inflation is actually a strategy for the government, right? It's a way of driving down living standards, making people work harder, and generally getting people to fall into line.
Well,
they don't want it, but they're quite happy to let it go.
Well, it seems like a trap, though, the electric car, just like the mobile phone is. You get the phone, and then then within a certain set period of time, this phone, within 3 or 4 years, is no longer good enough. You can't just change the battery because that's not enough. You then get a new phone, you're on a contract again, and it keeps rolling and rolling and rolling. I'm seeing...
But that is just technology.
No. I'm seeing the momentum of this, and I'm thinking that is actually not a good thing at all. Whereas if you buy a car, so you've got a petrol car, you can change one part of it, a bit of it here, a bit of it there. You can actually keep it running for longer. You're less likely to recycle it again after however many years. Usually we take our cars to the end of their lifespan, which is what I do with mine. And to me, that's more efficient. And actually, if you could find a fuel that I could use in the current infrastructure I have, which would be my current car, like something like biodiesel, to me that makes more sense.
Well, a really interesting thing that's happening with petrol and diesel cars, second-hand ones, is their prices are rocketing because the British public can understand that there's no way you're going to eliminate all old cars in 2030. And they also understand that with charging points, new parts, and all of these things, what was said earlier by our green friends just isn't true. There's no special reason why electric cars should get cheaper in a hurry. We've got a recession on, we've got lack of investment. Why should it follow that pattern? You know?
I mean, the only thing at the minute is that there's a tax break, isn't there, if you buy an electric car?
For now.
In London.
They just lowered the subsidy as well.
Yeah, exactly. My husband's just about to buy one for this reason, so it's a very pertinent conversation to me.
Yeah, this is the problem. There's a theme in here with the government incompetence, isn't there? They don't plan for the long term. If you're in government now, in this country or in any other country, you ultimately don't care what happens in 2050, 60, 70, because by that time you're not going to be in government, you're not going to be worrying about what's happening. And so we need to be planning for the future.
Need to plan for the future. Well, let's get back to our top story now, the Ghislaine Maxwell verdict. Here's Polly Middlehurst.
Nana, thank you. And if you've just tuned in, a British socialite, Ghislaine Maxwell, has been convicted of helping the American financier Jeffrey Epstein sexually abuse teenage girls. Let's take you live to New York and talk to Lisa Bloom, who's the trial lawyer at the Bloom firm representing one of Jeffrey Epstein's accusers. Thanks for talking to us tonight, Lisa. First of all, your reaction to this verdict that Ghislaine Maxwell is guilty on 5 of 6 counts of grooming and trafficking teenage girls.
Thank you. And actually, I represent 8 victims of Jeffrey Epstein, one of whom also has accusations against Ghislaine Maxwell. We are moved to tears that justice has finally arrived after so many decades of Ghislaine Maxwell walking free on this earth. May she never walk free again. Her actions have devastated the lives of so many girls and young women, interfering with their relationships and their careers and their sex lives and their mental health. And they have to live with that for the rest of their lives. It's just a very powerful day. My clients and I are beyond thrilled that at last justice has been served.
Thanks for that correction earlier on, and I learn as well that you're also in Los Angeles watching events in central Manhattan in New York. You refer to those women who have testified. 4 of them took to the stand, and they've been called tremendously inspirational, all of them testifying to the trial about the abuse they suffered. The bravery can't be underestimated as to what they did.
You know, it's almost hard to put into words. I mean, imagine the most humiliating, awful experiences of your life, and then having to go in front of a room full of strangers after having to talk to law enforcement and prosecutors and lawyers about over and over and over. And then you have to go in and testify. And then you have to be subjected to cross-examination. And well, you said it a little bit differently 2 years ago, and now you're saying it this way. Well, you had a drug addiction problem. Well, you had a sexual issue. Over and over again, just these brutal, painful questions, but they endured it. They were very brave. And I want everybody out there to know, because I represent many victims of sexual abuse now against high-profile predators, that you do not have to be perfect. You can have made mistakes in your life, as we all have. You can even have told the story differently in the past before you were ready to tell the full version later. It's okay. You can still be believed. And these 4 women were believed. And now Ghislaine Maxwell is a convicted sex trafficker facing the rest of her life probably in prison because of the courage, the tremendous courage of these 4 women, and also the hard work of the police and the prosecutors and the attorneys who brought this case to justice.
The defence case was that Ghislaine Maxwell was being scapegoated for the real crimes of Jeffrey Epstein, and in fact, as you say, brought the testimonies of those 4 brave young women into question. The star witness of the defence team being Elizabeth Loftus, the University of California's psychology professor, who told the jury people can have false memories of traumatic events. What was your reaction to that?
Well, I've litigated cases against her. She's never seen a sexual abuse victim who she believes. And my cases against her go back to the 1990s. I hope that she retires now, because it's really offensive to me that for large amounts of money, she's willing to come into court and say the sexual abuse victims are liars, their memories can't be trusted. It's just offensive. But I'm glad the jury saw through it. They asked to review her testimony. They asked to review a lot of testimony. The jury took their time. They were very careful. And ultimately, they rejected these ridiculous defense arguments and they sided with the victims.
So can I just get your reaction to a tweet put out by Virginia Giuffre just a short time ago, which says, "My soul yearned for justice for years, and today the jury gave me just that. I will remember this day always," she writes. "Having lived with the horrors of Maxwell's abuse, my heart goes out to the many other young girls and young women who suffered at her hand and whose lives she destroyed." And she carries on in a separate tweet. "I hope that today is not the end, but rather another step in justice being served. Maxwell did not act alone. Others must be held accountable. I have faith they will be."
Virginia is so brave and incredible, and she has been fighting for justice for a long time. And her name came up in this trial repeatedly. There was one very poignant moment where the driver testified that he remembered driving Ghislaine to Mar-a-Lago, which is owned by Donald Trump. And there was a young girl dressed all in white coming out of the spa, like a spa worker. And Ghislaine said, "Stop the car." And she got out and went up and talked to this girl. That ended up being Virginia Roberts, now Virginia Giuffre. And I just got chills when I heard that testimony, thinking about how Virginia's life was changed so drastically forever after because of that one chance meeting. And indeed, she has been standing up against Epstein and Maxwell for many years, and now has filed a lawsuit against Prince Andrew, accusing him of sexual abuse.
Lisa Bloom, live from LA, thank you very much indeed. And just on a legal point, we must stress Prince Andrew and his legal team, of course, deny all the charges that have been levelled against them. Let me just bring you a last reflection now as to what happened dramatically in central Manhattan tonight in New York as that verdict was announced less than an hour ago. The judge hearing the verdict that we all heard, that Ghislaine Maxwell, the British socialite and longtime girlfriend of Jeffrey Epstein, the financier who died in his prison cell in 2019, was found guilty on 5 out of 6 counts of grooming and sexual trafficking of teenage girls. Outside the courthouse in central Manhattan, we understand right now there is a media scrum and reporters are fighting position as the defence team and the prosecution team come out to give reaction to the media. We'll be covering that on GB News, but right now I have to hand you back to Nana Akua.
Well, a busy show tonight. Thank you so much to my panel for joining me today, and thank you so much to you at home for your company. I'll be back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. I'll leave you with the weather. Good evening.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there.
Another mild day tomorrow, still windy with some spells of rain, but some brighter breaks, particularly to the lee of higher ground towards the northeast. Low pressure firmly in charge. However, it's the wind direction which is determining how